Hi, my name is Aidan Finn of Cloud Mechanix, and in this video I'm going to explain what Microsoft Azure is. I'm a Microsoft Valuable Professional or MVP with a dual expertise of Microsoft Azure and Cloud and Data Center Management. I live in Ireland where I work as a technical sales lead for an Irish distributor of technologies. My customers are Microsoft partners, and for the last 3.5 years I've been teaching them how to sell and deploy Microsoft Azure solutions. I've been running a lot of in-house hands-on training with those customers, and I've built up a lot of knowledge and expertise about Azure over that time. I write on aidanfinn.com, my own site, but I'm also the contributing editor of Microsoft Virtualization at petri.com. I've started my own business with my wife called Cloud Mechanix, where I'm going to be bringing my knowledge to the UK and the rest of Europe. So we're going to be running our very first training course in London, and you can find out more details about that on london.cloudmechanix.com. It'll be running on February 22nd to 23rd in 2018 in central London at a hotel that's close to 3 underground stations on 3 different lines, and it's also less than 15 minutes walk from Paddington train station. The class is going to be £800 per person, but we'll reduce that to £700 per person if you book 2 or more seats. We'll be covering quite a bit, so if you're new, you'll be able to come to this class and get going. But also, if you're experienced with Azure, you should be able to learn quite a bit about Microsoft Azure and some solutions, and maybe doing things with better practices. And that's been my experience of the past. People who thought they knew Azure learned a lot at the class. So we'll talk more about that later. Let's have a look at what Azure is. The business looked at legacy IT, and still does look at legacy IT, as being a bit of a business problem. We're viewed as the bottleneck to getting things done. When the business has an opportunity, we're kind of slow to respond as IT pros. Now that's not necessarily our fault. It's we have a number of hoops that the business has actually forced onto us that we have to jump through. So we may have to get prices from multiple sources, and once we got through the tendering process, we have to go out and get POs, then we have to order stuff, and then maybe wait 7 to 10 days to get that hardware, maybe longer, install the stuff, secure the stuff, rack it, stack it, back it up, and then it could be several weeks, even months, before we can actually respond to a request from the business. Now the business didn't like that. They also don't like the fact that we're building up all this infrastructure, and suddenly, instead of being, a business that sells cars or whatever it is, we're suddenly becoming an accidental IT company. Now, the costs go up and up and up, and the business doesn't like that. They see IT as a cost center. And the other thing they don't like is capital expenditure. They're spending money on all these assets, and they're having to buy IT up front. They'd rather have something that's OPEX based. That leaves cash in the bank to actually jump on different business opportunities. It makes the business more flexible as well. Also helps make sure that your salary is being paid. That's why cloud computing was created. Now, cloud is a much more flexible utility way of thinking about IT. Instead of paying for this up front, we pay it on a drip feed basis. Now, what is a cloud? A lot of marketing companies will probably debate what a cloud actually is. However, the best or the most agreed upon definition could be found at an organization in the US called NIST. So they have a short paper that really does a great job at describing what a cloud is. So they have some essential traits. So I think the most important ones here are on-demand self-service and measured service. On-demand self-service basically means if I want something, I can sign into a portal and just deploy it for myself. I don't have to send off an email to a help desk. I don't have to pick up a phone to a salesperson. I don't have to wait 3 days to get some new VLAN deployed, which was broken all my firewall rules. Instead, I just go in there and I use software-defined networking, software-defined storage on shared infrastructure that's extremely scalable and elastic. And that elasticity leads into the measured service piece. In a true cloud, I can deploy what I need and remove what I need as needed. And I only pay for what I deploy while I use it. So if I have a need to expand my business in December to deal with the holiday demands of my customers, I can do that. But I don't have to pay for some massive amount of infrastructure up front. I'm not locking myself into some 3-year contract or 5-year service agreement. Instead, when January rolls around, I shrink my deployment or I get rid of it altogether, and my billing stops or is reduced. There are different ways we can consume cloud. And the first one's probably the one we're all familiar with, which is software as a service. If you're using email from the cloud or some online provider, you've been in this space. And some big name players in here will obviously be Google Apps, Gmail, and Office 365. Platform as a service and infrastructure as a service is where Azure comes in. Platform as a service is where a developer can execute their code in the cloud without having to deploy any infrastructure. The infrastructure is provided for them, or they're even better, they're on an infrastructure-free service. And that's something that Azure launched with. But eventually Azure had to launch an infrastructure as a service solution. Their customers needed or wanted virtual machine-based solutions. And this is where IaaS comes into play. It's the stuff that we know from Hyper-V or VMware, virtual machines, networking, and storage, the fundamentals of an IT infrastructure that are deployed in a self-service environment such as Azure. There are different ways we can have a cloud. There's the public cloud. So that's things like AWS, Google Compute, and Azure. There's a community cloud, which you won't see too much of, but they're generally created by universities and the like, where they share resources across their different entities and create a cloud across their different environments. There's a private cloud. That's one you have on your own site, or it's running on your own private infrastructure that's hosted by someone else. And then there's hybrid cloud, and this is something Microsoft really likes. And this is where we take public cloud and private cloud and run them together. So this is more than just a network connection, it's a consistency. So we have an infrastructure that's on-premise that is completely consistent with what's running from the service provider in the cloud. So what is Azure? Well, it's Microsoft's implementation of PaaS and IaaS, combined with a whole bunch of data and intelligence services. It's available as a public cloud, but you can also deploy it as a private or hybrid cloud solution. We'll talk more about that in a second. The PaaS is for the developers, and the IaaS is for the infrastructure people. And that's the stuff that I know pretty well. It's the virtual machines, the storage, and the networking. You'll find there's absolutely dozens, if not hundreds, of services in Azure. In fact, the price file we have at work, there's nearly 13,000 line items in there. And this covers a wide range of things. Now, you can have a look at that eye chart there, but there's probably a better site to have a look at, and you can see the URL down there, azureinteractives.azurewebsites.net. And if we have a look on a browser, we can see that this is a nice description of all the different services that are out there. And we can click into any one of these to find out a bit more about what it is, where the pricing is, where the documentation is, and what some of the related solutions are. So if I want, I can have a look at virtual machines, and I might say, I'd like to learn more about how to network to that. So I can learn about a service called ExpressRoute, where I can have a WAN connection or a private connection that's not on the internet to my virtual machine deployments in the cloud. We can see we have compute services, so that's either virtual machines or serverless computing or batch computing. We have networking to connect our services together in the cloud or even to on-prem. Storage solutions, so if I want structured or unstructured data, tiered storage, backup, disaster recovery solutions for on-premise, I can have that. Mobile and web, so I can run my line of business applications as web services without worrying about virtual machines. Or I can power my mobile apps, which are running on those intelligent edge devices, from the cloud. Containers, so you like Docker, you like Mesosphere, you like Kubernetes, all that stuff is built into Azure, and you can run containers in multiple different ways in Azure. Databases, so if you like SQL, PostgreSQL, MySQL, Cosmos DB with various different APIs, that's all there. Big data, Hadoop, machine analytics, cognitive services, IoT for thousands or millions of devices streaming data into the cloud where it can be stored and processed and understood, integrated with on-premise solutions. And you can secure your solutions too. So we have different ways of handling identity internally or externally or with partners. We can secure those solutions powered by AI. We also have, well, it's Microsoft, so they think developer first. So Visual Studio hooks directly into Azure, and we have a bunch of solutions in there. So if they want a test dev environment that's been locked down, they want Xamarin to help them develop on iOS or Android, they want API handling, that stuff is all there and more. Azure is absolutely huge, and there's many different services it can provide. But there's also Azure Stack, which is Microsoft's private cloud deployment of Azure. This is powered by Windows Server and takes the code of Azure and puts it on Windows Server in a hyper-converged storage spaces direct cluster, starting at 4 nodes and scaling up to 12 nodes. And you can deploy multiple stamps of these private clouds. And there's lots of scenarios where this makes sense, where customers want that consistency of Azure but need to have it on premise. It might be in manufacturing management, it might be in disconnected environments like ships. It could be in all sorts of environments, including industries where we just can't put stuff into a public cloud. There's just some legal requirement that says that data, those services must be local. But you know what? We'd like the consistency because cloud isn't where it is, it's how we work. And these solutions are available and had started shipping from the likes of Lenovo, Dell, and HP in September. But watch out for Cisco and Huawei, who will be shipping fairly soon too. Where is Azure? Well, Azure is all over the world, and Microsoft would claim that it's in 2 times more locations than the next 2 vendors put together. There are at the moment 36 generally available regions. Microsoft talk about 42. That's because they've also announced 6 more regions which aren't available yet, which should be coming on stream fairly soon. So we got 2 special regions coming in Australia, which have been government certified, 2 in South Africa, and 2 in France, which we expect to come online very, very soon. In Europe, we've got Europe North, which is in Dublin, and west of Europe North is Europe West. Or sorry, that's confusing. Europe North, we got Dublin. East of Europe North is Europe West, which is Amsterdam. Even more confusing, isn't it? Yeah, most people find that confusing. But Europe North is in Dublin, Europe West is Amsterdam. Then we've got UK South and London, UK West and Cardiff. There's 2 special regions in Germany, which are operated by a subsidiary of Deutsche Telekom. And they provide customers the ability to use Azure in an environment that the US government can't touch because it's not operated by Microsoft. We've got something similar going on in China, and there's some special regions in the US which are operated by Microsoft for the US government and the Department of Defense. There's lots of these regions, and the services that are available vary depending on the region, and the pricing can vary too. Good news is pricing in Europe North and Europe West for us Europeans is actually pretty good. You want to learn more about that. If you do a search in your favorite search engine for Azure regions, it'll bring you to this page. You can come in, you can have a look at the regions, you can see what services are available. So there's the American regions. And I can drop that, go to Europe, and let's include Germany and United Kingdom. And we can see the various different regions within Europe and what services are available. If you have a look on your favorite search engine for whatever the name of the service is in Azure with pricing, you'll also see the pricing for those services too. So a question people will have about any kind of hosting solution is how well certified is it? Is it compliant with various industries or countries' regulatory requirements? Microsoft would also claim that they are twice more compliant than AWS. You're going to see big names here like PCI DSS, ISO 27001, HIPAA, EU model clauses, EU Privacy Shield, and it goes on and on and on. If you want, you can actually do a search. Again, do a search for Microsoft Azure Compliance, and you'll be brought to the page that's linked there. So we can have a look at that, and that's the Microsoft Trust Center. And here we can see the certifications and the trust levels for lots of Microsoft Cloud services. So in particular, we're interested in Azure, so we can see all the certifications that are there. And you can see that's a long, long list. Now, if there's a particular one that's of importance to you, so let's have a look at ISO 27001. We can click on that, and that will bring us to a page where we can see a bit more about Azure's compliance. But we can also see the certificates and the audits. So if we click into here, we can see after a few seconds a page will load. We'll be asked to sign in, and then we can download the various different reports and the certificates for Azure's certification. And that's pretty good. So as a service provider or a customer, I can prove to my employer or my customer that Azure is actually compliant with that particular certification. Now, a lot of people will think Microsoft Azure, well, that's just for Windows and SQL Server, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Right now, 40% of the virtual machines that are running in Azure are running Linux. Microsoft loves Linux, genuinely. This is a very different Microsoft to 10 years ago. So you'll find all the big names are supported. And when I say supported, it's not that they just run, it's that there is a support mechanism for them. So if you have a ticket that you need to open because of some particular issue, some bug, some performance problem, Microsoft will support it. They have arrangements with the various different vendors and distribution units and support organizations in the open source world. So it's Red Hat Enterprise Linux, CentOS, CoreOS, Oracle, OpenSUSE, SLES, Ubuntu, CoreOS, Debian. The list goes on, and it's a growing list. You'll find there's an awful lot more distributions here than there are editions of Windows that are actually supported. And this extends right throughout the entire fabric of Azure. So Microsoft have containers. Everyone knows about containers. Well, they know about Docker. Microsoft were going to build their own management infrastructure for containers, but instead they partnered with Docker, and Docker is built into the Azure fabric. To orchestrate your containers, you can use Mesosphere, you can use Docker, you can use Kubernetes. When you want to deploy web apps or mobile apps, they can be powered by Linux or they can be powered by Windows. If you're in the DevOps world, don't think you have to go to AWS. You'll find lots of things from the Microsoft Partner Network supporting DevOps in Azure. So if you're doing things like Jenkins and all that other stuff, you can do that with Azure. You'll find Puppet and Chef extensions for virtual machines too, just built in. They're just a couple of checkboxes away. If you like databases, well, you've got Cosmos DB, and that supports various different APIs, including DocumentDB, MongoDB, GraphTable, and Cassandra. The Azure DB services are built on SQL Server, MySQL, and PostgreSQL. And if you like big data, well, Microsoft have their own solutions there for looking at data and analyzing data, but they've also built on Hadoop. So HD Insight is Microsoft's implementation of Hadoop in the Azure infrastructure, and they contribute their code back to the Hadoop open source community. So that's Azure in a nutshell. It's a big, huge product, and hopefully I'll get to talk to you, or some of you in the near future in London, at our event on February 22nd, 23rd at the Lancaster Gate Hotel in London. On day one, we'll be covering all the introductory stuff to get you up and running with virtual machines. So we'll be introducing you to Azure, understanding concepts like tenants, subscriptions, and admin, getting into some of the tooling, so the Azure portal, PowerShell, stuff like that. And then we'll start getting into the fundamentals like storage and networking. Day two, we get into the virtual machines. That's actually fairly easy. It's all the stuff around virtual machines. The performance, the management, the underlying infrastructure is probably more complicated. We'll get into the advanced networking, load balancing at layer 4 and layer 7, securing your environments at layer 4 and layer 7, doing fault tolerance between multiple regions, connecting networks. We'll look at backing up your environments and your data. We'll look at replicating your environments to another region just in case there's a disaster. Automating deployments and scaling out using JSON. Then understanding how to monitor your environment, diagnose problems, and get all email alerts. Or even triggering automatic actions using your alerting. And then we'll secure that environment using Security Center. So taking Security Center's recommendations and combining that with the artificial intelligence of Azure to monitor your environment on your behalf. So that's quite a lot. We'll cover that for £800 per person or £700 per person if there's 2 or more registrations. And you can learn more on london.cloudmechanics.com. So I've been Aidan Finn. Thank you very much for tuning into this video, and best of luck.